Are you a perfectionist, a people pleaser, somebody with an overthinking mind, a little bit of imposter syndrome thrown in there? Well, hang tight because we're going to talk about it today. Oftentimes when we talk about perfectionism, we don't actually know if we mean it in a good way or a bad way. Like if you call yourself a perfectionist, are you saying that this is a good thing? That you like to look at details and that you like to be specific and particular and that you like to do things in a certain way? Or when you say you're a perfectionist, are you saying that it's preventing you from doing things the way that you want to and that you can't put things out there, or you can't put yourself out there, or you can't put ideas out there unless it's perfect? And it's actually hindering you from your growth, from your evolution, from you being able to explore the things that you want to do. Which one, right? Because they're not created the same. Now, the other day I posted this video and I'll link it for you, but essentially what I was talking about is that in psychology research and in the perfectionism literature, perfectionism is broken into two separate categories. Like very clearly, these two things don't look the same. On one hand, we have perfectionism that is more adaptive, and it's essentially like a healthy type of perfectionism, like you setting goals for yourself and aspirations for yourself and setting yourself up to be able to achieve those things can feel really good, right? Like you have a goal, you did the goal, you feel amazing after you did the thing, and on the pathway, you might have quality control. You want to do certain things in a certain way. That's absolutely healthy, right? To have standards is a healthy thing. Now, on the other dimension of perfectionism, it's less healthy. It looks pretty damaging psychologically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually too, energetically too. It is driven by the fear of failing, right? So there is a type of perfectionism where when you are pursuing the things that you want to pursue, you're doing it not necessarily for the right reasons, or you're not pursuing it from a place of joy and enthusiasm from getting to do that thing. You're doing it because you think something's gonna break if you don't do it, right? You're more driven by the fear of what's gonna happen if you don't achieve this. So enter the list of things that could happen. You're like, I'm gonna do this thing, otherwise my parents aren't gonna like me. I'm gonna do this or my friends are not gonna like me, or society's gonna think this way about me, or I'm gonna let down my grandparents, or my spouse is going to feel this way, or my kids are disappointed, or da 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 da, right? Like there's all these stories, whether true or not, that's not what we're talking about, but there's all these stories about what you believe when you're pursuing something that makes your perfectionism called maladaptive, right? So there's adaptive perfectionism and then there's maladaptive perfectionism. In this conversation, I wanted to break down for you 4 archetypes of perfectionism that exist within this maladaptive category of perfectionism. So if you fall into this category where you're like, yeah, actually my perfectionism holds me back. It prevents me from pursuing things because I feel like it needs to be perfect, and it makes me procrastinate, makes me waste time, it makes me redo things, and I'm always in a loop, and I'm always thinking that I need to go learn more or study more or more, and I'm just never good enough to put it out there. I'm never good enough to pursue it, and then enter imposter syndrome, right? Enter overthinking, enter overdoing, enter dysregulation in your nervous system that prevents you from taking action towards the things that you want to do. So in this category of perfectionism, I'm going to recommend that you head to www.alwaysplay.org/perfection and take the perfectionist quiz. What type of perfectionist are you? And it's basically going to ask you a couple of questions that's going to separate you into these 4 archetypes. You might find that you resonate with more than one of the archetypes, which is totally fine because there's a lot of overlap. But even if there's characteristics that you resonate with from each of these archetypes, you're going to find there's one archetype that is more dominant for you, like a set of characteristics, thoughts, behaviors, and attitudes that better represent your experience in perfectionism and your experience in imposter syndrome, and how you are going to proceed healing through those things based on this particular archetype. That's www.alwaysplay.org/perfection. And then you can take that little quiz. Let me know in the comments what kind of perfectionist you land at. Go ahead and enjoy this episode. If you landed at Miss Afraid to Fail Perfectionist, girl, you have commitment issues, okay? You don't stick to anything long enough, and then you want to complain about having imposter syndrome because you haven't developed a skill or mastery or just the ability to be a beginner at something, and you're so afraid to fail that 1, you don't try, and 2, when you do try, as soon as it gets just a little bit hard or a little bit uncomfortable, you drop it, you quit. There's just such a big commitment issue here. And this is hurting you. This is something that's shown up over and over again in your life to the point where, it's time for you to look into why you do that, right? And this type of perfectionism, Miss Afraid to Fail perfectionist, you don't really set great goals for yourself because one, either you set very easy goals so that you can just achieve it and then get that quick win, that quick instant gratification, which has its time and its place because yes, sometimes we just need a quick win to feel, good and that's okay. But if that's all you're doing, you're never really getting out of your comfort zone. Okay. So you don't necessarily set goals that are reasonably challenging for you to expand, for you to grow, for you to develop mastery. You're kind of just staying in that same space. And two, you might not even set any goals because you're just like, if I set easy goals and I don't even make those and I fail at those, then it really makes me a true loser. So your goal setting is trash. It is absolute shit because your fear of failure prevents you from growing, from developing, from evolving in many different ways. Now, there's many reasons why any of us are afraid of failing, right? There's so many different reasons and why behind it, and the reasons are valid, right? They might be because of trauma or because of parents or because of a event in your life or because of living in survival mode or because of your spouse or because of your family, right? There's so many different reasons for why you came to here. But the fact of the matter is this fear of failure is really preventing you from evolving in many different ways. A big way that fear of failure can manifest for this type of perfectionism is that you do things because you think it's expected from you. You think that this is what you're supposed to do, and you were pressured into making decisions in your life because you thought it would impress somebody or make somebody happy, like your parents or your school or your counselor or your advisor or your sibling. You did it because you didn't want to let them down, So there is this underlying energy, this underlying driver of the fear of abandonment. The way that sometimes we think that people are going to leave us and reject us and not pay attention to us if we're not good enough. It's kind of this driver for this type of perfectionism. So you are basically doing things for others, it has a little bit of people-pleasing qualities in there, and it makes you afraid to try things that you actually enjoy because you can't rationalize doing those things when there's so much to be achieved out here, and it makes you want to seek love and acceptance from other people rather than from yourself. And this thought of abandonment, this inner voice is really about self-doubt. It's really always doubting yourself and your worthiness, your capability, your capacity, your worthiness of being appreciated and loved and accepted, even if you're not perfect, right? And because you don't want the risk of somebody not staying and not loving you and not caring about you, you're basically just doing things out of the fear that they're going to leave and that the rejection is too much. And of course, we want to avoid rejection. That is so human. We don't want to be rejected all the time. And so that it becomes the main driver. Like you just don't want to be abandoned. And so you are driven by that. You're driven by the fact that you don't want to be left alone. You don't want to disappoint somebody. You don't want them to feel a certain type of way towards your performance or your ability or your presence. So you do all the things. The motivation is that you're afraid, right? Like a fear is driving here. So the way to heal this relationship is to shift your relationship with what and why you do the things that you do. Okay. So if your projects and the things that you pursue, the things that you spend your time, energy, money, resources on is always because you think it's going to impress somebody, or because, if you don't do it, you think that somebody is going to think you're a loser, then you have to shift your relationship with that. It's like, how can I initiate and do things that feel exciting and awesome to me, regardless of whether it's easy or not? That's not even like on the scale right here, but it's because it's going to fulfill me in some kind of way. And that feels selfish for this type of perfectionist. It feels very wrong, but essentially shifting your relationship with what you're doing and why you're doing it is going to help you understand that it's okay if you're not good right now. It's okay if you're not the best right when you start. It's okay if there's some things that need to be adjusted and changed and shifted. But how is it that you can heal through that by allowing yourself to know that failure is just a part of learning, is a part of growing, is a part of evolution, is part of being better, right? Like nobody did anything good by just being the best at it ever. People had to do the same things over and over again. Then they had to make micro adjustments to not do it poorly. Then they had to do it again to make more adjustments. And then they realized that whatever they were doing was completely wrong. And then they had to be okay with that. Right? This is your nervous system to say that I'm not going to just be so discouraged as soon as it's uncomfortable. I'm going to allow myself to still keep going, even if I feel that there is this like big, annoyance of being new or being what I think is a failure. And how do I shift my relationship to that failure? Yeah. So let me know if you resonate with this Miss Afraid to Fail perfectionist. What qualities are you paying attention to lately? And of course, if you're interested to come into a 6-week exploration of perfectionism, I'm inviting you to Imperfect. I am perfect. You can head to www.alwaysplay.org/imperfect to find all the details. It's 6 weeks of self-exploration in perfectionism, going through the driving mechanisms of why you have this type of perfectionism, and also creating a pathway for you to heal this type of perfectionism going forward. So if you're interested to come through, head to www.alwaysplay.org/imperfect. I am perfect. I'll see you inside. If you landed at Miss at all costs perfectionist, you do things at all costs. And I mean at all costs. Cost to your mental health, cost to your emotional health, cost to your friends, your family, your relationship, cost to your spiritual health, cost to your energy, because you're pushing yourself to the limit all the time. You don't want to fail. And you don't want to fail so badly that you would rather destroy and harm things on your pathway, because you would rather destroy those things than bother failing just one time, or bother, stopping one time, or bother just allowing yourself to not do something so perfect one time. And all these archetypes of perfectionism has a very similar string that is being interwoven, that is all about failure, all about fear, all about, right? But there's some nuance to this all-cost perfectionist that we're going to talk about. So this person, if you're this person, you're out here doing the most and you don't actually care about what you're doing. It's like, I'm just going to achieve it because I'm just going to achieve it. I'm going to achieve it because I'm the best. I'm going to be number one, and I'm going to work here, and I'm going to do this. I'm checking things off the box. I'm checking things off of my list because it makes me feel like I've achieved something. And in this pathway, because you have put in so much value to this checklist that you have, which is completely made up, by the way, you made it up or somebody assigned it to you when you were a very young kid, and you never questioned it. You never thought do I want a job at the hedge fund? Why? What type of job do I actually want? You never considered that. Or do I want to study this? Do I want to do this? What are my original thoughts versus something that was passed down to me? So because many of these things are just check box things on your list, you're basically just very motivated to get shit done. And sometimes you burn bridges along the way, and 100% you burn yourself out. This is burning fire energy. You don't care what the cost is. You don't care the repercussions. You don't care that you need 6 coffees in the morning. You don't care about the substances that you're leaded to because you're so burnt out. You don't care that you don't have good friends. You don't care that your social support is this type of way. You don't care. You don't care because on the list it looks good. You're like, oh, I this apartment, I got this house, I got this boyfriend, I got this thing, I got my clothes, and this is a high achiever energy, but not in a great way. This is not a compliment, okay? This is yes, sometimes it's okay, cool, you got to put your head down and you got to, work the hours. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes there isn't the luxury or the privilege to do the exact thing that you want to be doing or to create the exact thing that you want to be creating. Sometimes you do need to, put in your hours. Yes, absolutely. Okay. But it's not working out. And this type of perfectionism can sometimes look adaptive because it's look, my perfectionism has made me achieve things, but you're burnt out. You're unhappy. Your nervous system is shot. Your adrenal glands are crap. And you're basically going in this hyper aroused state that requires you to burn out every couple of months. Okay. And you're so shocked and surprised why your period periods are not regular, why your emotions are this way, why your mood shifts this way, and why you're experiencing such like dramatic ups and downs all the way. Like, it's not cute. You know what I mean? That's the cost. That's the cost that you're paying. So if you look hard enough, you probably make very aggressive decisions that feel really right? But you don't consider the emotional, mental, physical, spiritual consequences of that, right? Like if you're like, okay, I'm going to work 80 hours, that's just what I'm going to do. Yeah, maybe it is required for your survival to work 80 hours. Like if you are, like financially responsible for a family that requires that amount of labor, or if you're doing this or that, there might be a time where 80 hours is reasonable. But if you're like, this is my normal and it makes me better than you because I do 80 and you do 40, or I do 90 and you only do 80, right? Like then like, okay, do you want a sticker for that? Like, you want a sticker for your burnout? Because it's not cute. This is exactly how people get to their 40s for a midlife crisis. This is a setup for a midlife crisis. Okay. This is when you're like, okay, fuck it. I'm going to quit my job. I'm not going to do this. And you finally wake up to the point that you haven't really been making moves in a way that is in alignment with you, or in a way that is aligned for you. It's just not healthy. So you're motivated also, just like our Miss Afraid to Fail perfectionist. You're also afraid to fail, okay? But your inner voice is driven by your ego. Ego rules your thoughts because it is sometimes so unkind. And just the way that you do things is so unkind because you think that there is like so much to be achieved. And this makes you seek love and acceptance from others more than from yourself. When you're so disrespectful to your time, your energy, your needs, your health, your mental health, your wellness, your well-being, it's disrespectful because you think that if you achieve these things, then society's going to value you more. And if you do this thing and then your friends are going to think some type of way about you, or if you do that, then your family is going to get that approval. And even if in your heart you feel that this is not coming, but you check the facts, you check the data, you check the data points and your behavior, your thoughts and your action, you're going to see that you're driven because you want acceptance from others. You want people to like you. Even if you want to fool yourself and you say you don't give a shit and you don't care and it doesn't matter, who are you doing it for? What did you prove by doing all of these different things? Like, did they actually come from your own desire to achieve? Like, did you set up things for yourself because it was exciting for you and it was worthwhile of a challenge for you? Or is it because you wanted other people to think some type of way about you? Whether it's society, whether it's parents, right? Fill in the blank. So to heal this type of perfectionism, it is to build a different relationship with your goals and passions. And it's very similar to the way that we just talked about it being at all costs, right? If you could channel that energy to do something that maybe has quote unquote less value in society, or it isn't necessarily this like high ranked position, but it actually brings you joy, this becomes healing. Because now you're building a different relationship with why the heck you actually want to achieve this thing, right? Like why did you want to work there? Why did you want this type of job? Why did you want this type of career? Is it because you actually enjoy some aspect of it that feels very fulfilling for you? Or is it because you thought that if I did this, then society would see me in a different way? Or if I did this, then society would accept me in a different way? What was the reason there? So if you resonate with at all costs perfectionists, let me know which components stuck out to you, which elements stuck out to you. And of course, if you're interested to come into a 6-week exploration of perfectionism, I'm inviting you to Imperfect. I am perfect. You can head to www.alwaysplay.org/imperfect to find all the details. It's 6 weeks of self-exploration in perfectionism, going through the driving mechanisms of why you have this type of perfectionism, and also creating a pathway for you to heal this type of perfectionism going forward. So if you're interested to come through, head to www.alwaysplay.org/imperfect. I am perfect. I'll see you inside. If you landed at Miss Not the Right Time Perfectionist, you are so good at coming up with the best, aka worst excuses to actually taking actions towards your desires because you think you will fail and low-key you're afraid of your own success. So I hope that you're seeing the common theme is that fear of failing is a very big fear for perfectionists in general, but there is such a nuance to this not the right time person. And oftentimes this person, this type of perfectionism shows up in a way where you're so afraid of what it's going to be like if you succeed that you don't know if you can handle it. Like you don't know if you're going to actually be able to receive that. And a part of your nervous system feels so triggered by success or by just being able to deal with the type of change that's going to come when you succeed that it would rather do a bunch of shit in order for it to not happen. So you'll self-sabotage, you'll create excuses, and you'll be like, oh, then I need this and I need that. It's imposter syndrome. You're gonna name it many things, but this perfectionism is a very specific type. So you don't even believe your own stories. You know what I mean? Like if somebody was to actually ask you in depth that like, do you actually believe that you need to wait 10 more years? Like, do you actually believe that you need to wait this and that? You're gonna call yourself out. You're gonna actually be able to decipher that you're telling a shitty story, right? Because you don't actually believe your stories when you hear them out loud. When it's in your own head and you're repeating them to yourself or you're repeating it to somebody who is an echo chamber for you, it makes sense. You're like, yeah, I should wait until January 1st because that's the new year. Or no, it's February, so I cannot start in February. Valentine's Day is coming up. Oh no, it's summer. Like I shouldn't do fall. No, like you actually believe this shitty narrative that you tell yourself because you said it so many times. Your brain cannot decipher between what is like absolute shit and what is the truth, right? Or the objective truth. It just cannot tell the difference. So your whole thing is that you're waiting for the perfect time, and each time you have some creative reasons for why it's not the right time. And if people had $5 for every time you said that, and you created a story of this, like the Mercury is in retrograde, and then my Venus sign is not here tonight, and then today is this and that, and then like my toenail is too long on this side and it's not even, and then like I didn't wear the right color underwear, or like okay, like creative, big claps for you on the creative storytelling. But honestly, do you have a headache from all of this story? Like I do. I'm raising my hand right now, and I bet you do too. And this type of perfectionism is really about procrastination. You know, it is this inner voice that keeps telling you that I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. And so you create, and it's such a believable story, right? Like it's like such a believable story that you tell, like I almost fell for your shit again. But we're on year 5, you know, like we're on year 5, so I can't fall for that again. Then you're making a fool out of me now, you know? And so deep down inside, you know that most things don't really have to do with timing, but rather you truly feel like you will fail if you bother trying, right? Like if you gave it your all and it just wasn't enough, and you really did your best and like no one came, and you really put it out there, and the first time it wasn't the biggest success ever, do you have the resiliency? Do you have the ability to build up that resiliency to keep showing up even in times when it doesn't work out, even in times when you're not going to see quick short-term successes? Do you have what it takes to build resiliency? And yes, resiliency is built. It is something that you may innately have. Many people have more resiliency to begin with than others, absolutely, but resiliency can be built as well. It is about training your nervous systems to have a relationship with discomfort, to have a relationship with failure. Yeah. So this drive, your driver is this self-doubt, okay? And the inner voice is this, I'm not good enough. And to heal this type of perfectionism, you have to build a stronger relationship with yourself and resiliency to going outside of your comfort zone. You know, the things that you know are comfortable. And if you're happy with that, there's no reason to like push yourself outside of certain things. But we're talking about perfectionism that is impeding and hindering the way that you're experiencing life right now. And so if this is a hindrance and you have something to do about it, and you have the ability to train your nervous system to deal with things that are outside your comfort zone, why won't you? right? Like it seems silly that you may have the tools, but you won't use them, right? Like that is a silly perspective. So it is really about, now for the not the right time perfectionist, it's really about deciding when, because again, like you're going to say right now is not the time for me to get into this work, or right now is not the time for me to build resiliency, or right now is not time for me to do self-development or self-exploration, or da da da. Right now it's never the right time, Beach. It's like it's never the right time. You're just in a circle. You're in a circle. You're looping. You're in a circle, and it's like punches to your gut when somebody says that to you, and it's triggering to hear that, because deep down it's true that you are in your own way, that your self-doubt is part of the bigger story. Yes, timing does matter. Absolutely does. It's not like anything is meant for any time, like absolutely. But you know the difference when it's a shitty story and you want me to believe your shit, or if it's the truth. You know what I mean? And when you say it out loud to somebody who can hold you accountable to that, and when you can hear yourself like lying to yourself, it's a little embarrassing. Not gonna lie, it feels a little shameful. You're just like, oh yeah, I just like really tried to convince you of something that I made up. And I repeated it so many times to my partner. And my partner is just reflecting it back to me, and he's just listening to me. She's just listening to me. They're just listening to me, but they're not really calling me out on that, because maybe that's not their place to. They just want to comfort you, but comfort and growth are separate things. And part of you healing this type of perfectionism is building a relationship with yourself and the resiliency to going outside of your comfort zone. You get it? So let me know if you resonate with what's being said about this archetype. And of course, if you're interested to come into a 6-week exploration of perfectionism, I'm inviting you to Imperfect. I am perfect. You can head to www.alwaysplay.org/imperfect to find all the details. It's 6 weeks of self-exploration in perfectionism, going through the driving mechanisms of why you have this type of perfectionism, and also creating a pathway for you to heal this type of perfectionism going forward. So if you're interested to come through, head to www.alwaysplay.org/imperfect. I am perfect. I'll see you inside. If you landed at the Miss People Pleaser Perfectionist, you do things for the love, affection, and acceptance from others instead of learning about what you actually need and want. Now, people pleaser on its own is basically this phenomenon where you care so much about what other people need and think to the point where it's a detriment to you. So this is very much different than being somebody who is kind and generous and considerate of others. That is a different category than people pleasing, which inherently means that it is a detriment to you. So you're often pouring from an empty cup. You're often doing things when you don't want to. You have a hard time saying no. You're drained at the end of the day. So you pleased them, but you didn't necessarily receive an exchange that felt worthy or valuable to you at the end of the day. Okay. So most of your choices are always for other people. So it might be for parents, friends, colleagues, etc. But you rarely do anything for yourself. Okay. And when you do it for yourself, you feel really guilty or shameful. And when you do have boundaries, you feel like you're letting people down, or you're being mean, or you're being a bitch, or you're doing something that's not expected of you. And it makes you feel wrong. Like in your physical body, it feels wrong. So when you're doing things for other people and what they want you to do, you basically have no agency and control over yourself. You have no say in your own sovereignty, right? Like you have no say in your own agency. So you're likely setting goals that make other people proud of you because you like getting the validation from them. So you might pursue a career, do a job, or take on a project, or do, overextend yourself in a certain way because you like the validation. Somebody said thank you. And it's not even like this validation that has a lot of, monetary value, but it's just somebody said thank you and they said that you were a good friend and you like that. It feels good. And so again, not to differentiate being somebody who is helpful and kind and courteous versus being somebody who's doing things at the detriment to yourself, okay? This also makes you a horrible goal setter because you're always, trying to prove your worth and your value to other people so that they'll stay your friend or they'll be with you. You'll go out of your way to take care of people and to be considerate and overextend, but you find yourself to be bitter because people don't reciprocate it back to you. They don't even hit 2% of the things that you do. So, you say you don't care about it. You say it doesn't matter. You say that it didn't bother you, but it does. And it low-key makes you really bitter, and it makes you feel alone and isolated, and you feel like you're not being taken care of and nobody cares about you. And even if you say you don't care, you wish that others would do for you what you do for them. There's a part of you that feels unworthy of love and care because you keep being disappointed by people you give so much to. Imagine, and I'm sure you don't have to imagine if you landed at this type of perfectionism. It's just that you do so much, and then it's like, okay, I'm trying to be, a giver without expectations, but I feel gypped at the end of the day. I showed up for you in 30 ways and you couldn't even do it for once. I showed up for you for 50 different ways and you couldn't even do this one, right? You act like I'm asking you for the world's biggest favor by asking you this one small thing. And I shouldn't have to feel that if I'm asking this of you, especially when I'm doing things for you all the time, right? So there's this inequivalent exchange. And there's a part of you that feels unworthy, the more that you keep doing and the less you keep getting. And even if you want to pretend that you don't care to get, that you don't care to receive, your soul says otherwise. Your subconscious says otherwise. Your nervous system says otherwise. Your emotion says otherwise. Your mind and your heart says otherwise. And this people-pleasing perfectionism has prevented you from standing up for yourself in many, many ways, right? It has exhausted you emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and maybe financially, if that's the way that you're people-pleasing, right? You're giving out a lot of finances and then, finding out the hard way that maybe that's not the exchange that you should be making, right? So for this type of perfectionism, this people-pleasing perfectionism, your drive is being accepted by others. You just fear so much about being abandoned that it rules everything that you do. You're almost trying to prove your value, your worth, and your usefulness to people all the time. And because if you don't do it, and if you don't go out of your way, they're not going to like you. They're not going to hang out with you. They're not going to accept you. They're not going to be your friend. So there's this underlying loneliness. And if you cut them off, if you were not useful to them and you still try to maintain a relationship, would they still care about you? Would they still value you? Would they still accept you? So there's this part of you that doesn't feel like you're enough, And so being abandoned, it rules your thoughts. It rules your subconscious. It rules the way that you show up because you're not always being reasonable about the exchange. It's always one-sided, or one side, your side, is just a little bit more imbalanced than what you're receiving back in return. So to heal this type of perfectionism, you have to develop self-love, to know your own needs and wants and that they're worthy too, right? To understand that what you need and what you want aren't these selfish, disgusting things. And when people are struggling or suffering and you also need help in some kind of way, it's not a wrong thing. You're also a person, you're also existing, you're also, doing the best that you can, as with everybody else. And so it's okay if you need a little thing. But you need self-love to advocate for that, to advocate for a boundary, to advocate for your space, to advocate for many things. You have to be able to allow yourself to develop that self-love. And from that self-love, this people-pleasing starts to dissipate, because when you care about yourself, and you love yourself and you're compassionate towards yourself, that radiates from the inside out. So people know not to fuck with you. You know what I mean? They know that they're not going to ask you to do unreasonable things and ask unreasonable things from you because you don't give off that energy anymore. Because if you're saying yes and yes and yes to every person, place, thing, situation, but then all of a sudden you take that back for yourself and you say, let me choose me, let me choose myself, let me choose my own desires, and let me balance that. How do I balance showing up for other people, but also respect my personal needs as well? Yeah. All right. So let me know what you resonate with in this type of perfectionism, the people pleaser perfectionist. And of course, if you're interested to come into a 6-week exploration of perfectionism. I'm inviting you to Imperfect. I am perfect. You can head to www.alwaysplay.org/imperfect to find all the details. It's 6 weeks of self-exploration in perfectionism, going through the driving mechanisms of why you have this type of perfectionism, and also creating a pathway for you to heal this type of perfectionism going forward. So if you're interested to come through, head to www.alwaysplay.org/imperfect. I am perfect. I'll see you inside. Thank you for joining me and exploring the 4 perfectionist archetypes. I definitely want to know what you got. Leave it down in the comments. And friends, just remember, the world is your playground. And until next time, I will catch you soon.